Happy Friday, everybody. Friday evening. Some of you may be out and about doing some things that are getting your weekend started, but we are here. I'm a loser that doesn't have much to do, I guess. So that's why we're here Friday Friday evening. Well, I'm speaking only for me, my friend. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We were going to go earlier this week, but we decided to squeeze one in last minute for you. Preview the game. Hey, the game's a little later on Sunday anyway, right? So we'll go a little later on from our usual Thursday or Friday. But appreciate you joining us live on Friday evening or catching us after the fact. If that's your jam, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran. John, I mean, it's like, how many times do we have to say this one's a must win? This one's a must win. It's like every single week now. Now it's win and string together wins. It's like must win and then plus more wins.
It's not a must win game. It's a must win month at this point. And we could talk about how that's
I like that.
a possibility, but I don't know. Like it's a combination of the team not doing well and it's fall, but it doesn't feel like fall. And I know it's really selfish of me to complain about the weather when there's some other parts of the country that deserve those complaints a little bit more. But now I think just one win can turn some frowns upside down here.
Yeah, and just first and foremost, as Bengals Giants aside, I know we have a lot of friends, listeners, former coworkers, etc., that are in the Florida area. And sounds like, at least from what I could tell on Twitter and whatnot, most, if not all, were, obviously safe, which is first and foremost the most important thing. And then, of course, it sounds like minimal damage to their property or that sort of thing occurred. A couple of blackouts, it seemed, power outages, stuff like that. But we know we've got a lot of Bengals friends, both that do the same kind of stuff that we do on a contributor basis, and also just listeners of our show and stuff. So we've been thinking about you.
Absolutely, man. I know Jer Bear, who does Tigers Talk. She was right in the path, and I believe she may have lost power, but it got back pretty quickly. So her and everyone else that is in this community, and anyone listening, we're thinking about you, and hopefully you're doing well.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's start talking about this because I mean, we've been noting the urgency, right? Of hey, Bengals, we got to get this going, and week 2, and then after week 4, week 3, week 4, it's kind of like, yeah, we know we got to get this thing going, but it wasn't panic mode. This week, going into this one, after that just devastating loss and wacky loss against the Baltimore Ravens, the Bengals defensive captains or leaders, a group of them, kind of ring-led a defensive players only meeting, no coaches, that sort of thing. And usually these, you could debate the merits on how these go, right? These have happened a handful of times. We've seen this throughout when Marvin Lewis was here, the offense was doing it, that sort of thing. And it's really kind of a grab you around the ring of your collar and say, everybody's got to have a hard look in the mirror, do your job, do the work. Not really a ton of details coming out, and nor should it be. It's a private meeting amongst the players. But Mike Hilton, defensive back, who missed last week, kind of told everybody, hey, this is what we were doing. And we know we got to be better. We got to show up. We can't waste the type of season that Joe Burrow is putting forth for our team.
Yeah, it's just everyone knows what the issue is. Like, it's not like when you're 1-4, typically multiple things are going awry for you, but it's a pretty isolated thing. The defense is not living up to snuff, and it hasn't taken the step that it needed to from last year. And I think what's interesting about a players only meeting is that on all three levels of this defense, there are leaders from those 2021 and 22 runs. Like it's a newish defense in a lot of ways because there are new faces and there are some faces that are no longer there, but there are still leaders who have been with this team for many years who know what it was like to kind of get through those seasons, even when this defense was never that dominant. They were very opportunistic and they made the plays when they needed to, and they were good at keeping teams out of the end zone. And it's those specific things that just haven't translated with this particular unit. So I'm curious, for the likes of Hilton and Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Trey Hendrickson, Von Bell, these guys who are still huge contributors and starters on this defense. I'm curious about what that message was like of trying to get back to that style of defense. Maybe it's not so simple because there are obviously key personnel changes outside of them. Like for the most part, it's a pretty brand new secondary outside of Von Bell compared to those 2 years. There's some new faces who haven't really played that much on the defensive line, but there are so many things wrong with this defense right now. And it may not be as simple as just, getting your head on right. Maybe it is more of a personnel issue, but they have no choice but to take a long, hard look in the mirror and figure out what they can do in terms of what they can control.
It's got to be better. Again, it's kind of like this. This is the same discussion we had about the Bengals offensive line for, better part of 3 seasons, right? We felt like they were turning a corner last year with Orlando Brown coming into the fold. And, as they changed things up actually towards the end of the season, did a little more running and, different things than strictly out of shotgun, the things started to kind of trend in a better direction. Then you have the combination of Trent Brown and Marius Mims this year. And so the offensive line has really become a pretty steady unit, knock on wood, to this point. And so now that as we focus away from that group that has kind of been in the bullseye of so many fans and, people that cover the team, now it's all in the defense. Mike Hilton, credit, all the people that kind of wrangled that together to make that happen. I think it's a good move. I question, how effective are these things? I don't know if there's a metric for everything, but I don't know if there's like a win-loss record coming off of a players only meeting type of statistic out there. I feel like, though, John, that this is kind of like the last year, the Monday night game going against the Rams, right? It's like, okay, now it's serious big boy time. There are some red flags everywhere here. We gotta make sure that we pull our weight here. So, I don't think it can hurt. I guess in my mind, I go, well, how much does it help? I don't know. I don't think it hurts. I wonder about what's the effectiveness here? It's
a couple of things because it's both, I think, a talent issue and like an execution issue, because I think up front, they just haven't had the guys that can get after the quarterback. And that's been very noticeable on tape. It's really just Trey Hendrickson getting off of a block. And whether it's in pass rush or in run defense, it's not been good enough. And I don't even think it's like that much of an effort issue. It's just, they're just not as talented as they should be in some of those critical areas that have led to a trickle down effect with the rest of the defense. But behind them, I still think that Geno Stone is a lot more talented than the production that he's had. Obviously, Cam Taylor-Britt is a lot more talented and should be a lot more consistent than who he is. And the same can probably go for DJ Turner. But for the secondary, it's more of the same lines of like guys not being in the right spot and playing out of sorts and mixing up coverages and breaking their own coverage rules. And it's a lot of guys playing, kind of in the wrong spots and leading to a lot of these miscommunications and explosive plays. It's a combination of both things that can be corrected and some things that unfortunately should have been addressed maybe in the offseason with some other moves. So all they can do right now is just work with who they have. And I think what's notable is the fact that over the past couple of weeks, we've seen Lou Anarumo just try out basically every combination of personnel that he's had available to him. Like pretty much no one who is playing terribly has not been giving a hard look at the bench and have someone else kind of come in there and play for him. It's gone for Von Bell. It's gone for, I think, Geno Stone for a couple of times. It's gone for Cam Taylor-Britt. Like they've been trying everything. They've been throwing everything onto the wall to see if it sticks. And unfortunately, nothing has really stuck to the point where this defense can look somewhat competent. So it's just a matter of doing anything in their power at this point to just get their head on straight, because at least making sure that you're in the right position and you're playing sound within the scheme, that's all they can hope for. And they got to hope that the talent just kind of rises as everyone gets back to health.
Well, there's work to do everywhere. Thankfully, when we'll get to this in just a second, more good news on the injury report front. The Bengals are finally getting healthier. They got some guys back last week, and some guys popped up on the injury report this week, but it looks like they're going to be getting them back, and or just there's the issue is cleared up throughout the week type of thing for them. Maybe the little extra time to Sunday night helps with that, but still work to do everywhere. And like you said, tackling needs to be short up. They need to find someone to provide somewhat kind of consistent pressure that's not Trey Hendrickson, and they just need to be stout at the point of attack, really. So you will see about the effectiveness on this defensive players only meeting going into this week. I think it could only really help. It's just a matter of really how much help is it going to provide. We'll see here. John, I'm springing something on you. We didn't discuss this in pre-show, but there's a couple non sequiturs that came to my mind here in terms of topics that aren't about this particular game, and or we just talked about Mike Hilton, right? And he was kind of the guy that expressed the the players only meeting and everything. Hindsight is 2020, and what shoulda, woulda, couldas are sometimes useless to discuss. But what do you think? Because he missed last week. What do you think his impact was his impact and leadership on the field? Kind of one of the, because if you saw, they were doing all kinds of different things across the passing game. Do you think he would have been kind of the difference maker? I know we can debate rankings as well, but I had this thought this week, like, man, just the way that Lamar was passing the ball and those, intermediate routes going far and all kinds of different stuff, just having that veteran leadership, a guy who is known as a pretty good tackler, having him out there. Do you think that would have been able to kind of push that game in a different direction, or would it just would have been what it was?
I think he's better than Jalen Davis, who ended up playing a decent amount in that game. But what was surprising was how effective on the boundary, the Ravens passing game ended up being with both Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. Like, it wasn't necessarily a lot of, check downs to the running backs, or, Mark Andrews got involved on a couple plays, but he didn't necessarily dominate the game like he's done in years past. Like, it was mainly just towards the outside, and on a lot of these broken plays, obviously where Lamar was buying time, and obviously that's how that one highlight reel touchdown happened as well. So I'm not sure that, slot coverage, an improvement in that regard would have made that big of a difference. But obviously, Mike has been practicing with the starters more than obviously Jalen Davis, who was a practice squad elevation. So he has more, continuity and experience working with all these guys in the secondary. So you would think that theoretically that would help, but I don't know if they were like a slot cornerback away from really stopping anything that was happening with the Ravens, because again, like, it was just a complete lack of pass rush that put even more stress on the secondary. And, Luna Ruma, I think, blitzed 40 something times in this game. That's not even an exaggeration. Like, he blitzed pretty much most of the game because he was just trying to do anything to get into that backfield. And when you run cover zero and you run man free, that puts your, defensive backs in even more of a bind. And I don't even think man coverage is what Mike Hilton is particularly good at this stage of his career. Maybe if you're only covering for a couple seconds because the pressure gets home, he's able to stay with the receiver, make a play on it. But no, like, there were just too many, elongated plays that Lamar was extending. And I feel like at this point in his career, that's not necessarily where Mike Hilton's strength is. Maybe on some of those perimeter plays, he would be able to make a tackle in the backfield because that's something he's still good at. But I don't know. I feel like his impact probably would have been more on the mental side, like you were kind of alluding to. Maybe that would have led to maybe a couple plays here and there.
Yeah, that part. And then you mentioned blitzing. He excels at that. So that's something where maybe you get one extra takedown of Lamar, or, I know Henry didn't have much of a day until the final run in overtime there, but, maybe on the other backs or that sort of thing, maybe he would have had an effect there. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. He wasn't available. You got to rise to the occasion anyway. But just a guy, seeing as how he came kind of top of my mind because he talked about this players only meeting this week, and so I was wondering about him last week. And the other one I wanted to bring up to you, and this was actually a question, and I'm gonna cause you to think on your feet here a little bit with this one. So we do a 5-question series with another SB Nation blog that we write out, and we exchange questions, kind of previewing. And it's really helpful when it's a team you don't pay a ton of attention to. I mean, we pay attention to a lot of teams and players, and obviously we cover the draft so much, we know where these guys land and all that kind of stuff. Truth be told, the Bengals don't face NFC East teams often. So it's, while the Giants are on TV a lot and primetime a lot because of their market, I don't watch a ton of Giants football week in, week out, right? So it's a good way to get kind of that look over the fence there. And so Ed Valentine and I exchanged some questions, and he had asked me what I thought of the BJ Hill trade in the grand scheme of things. They look back and they, obviously they're looking like, man, if BJ Hill was here next to Dexter Lawrence, if it was the BJ Hill that the Bengals received, he kind of claimed, man, they were so starved for offense, and so that's why they were, basically giving away a player like BJ Hill. Where would you rate that trade in terms of player trades in Bengals history? I mean, there's a few. The Brian Leonard one to me is a really good one because the Bengals got that. It was Orion Harris, I think, who they traded for him, and they got Orion Harris back later in the season, and Brian Leonard was like a great clutch utility guy. That's one. I mean, obviously James Brooks is another, but I don't know. Just in your mind, where does this kind of rank up there for you?
It's top 2, and I think up there along with it is Reggie Nelson for David Jones, because Reggie Nelson, I believe, was a Pro Bowler. If not, I don't think he was an All-Pro, but it was 2015. I believe he was a Pro Bowler, and he was a extremely good and underrated free safety for many years. He was a Jesse Bates before Jesse Bates, and David Jones was like a back of the roster cornerback. And the fact that they were able to do that, I think at a similar time in the offseason as Billy Price for BJ Hill, was extraordinary. But I mean, those two stand out as like netting surplus starter value and talent on defense for, a player that you wouldn't think a second thought of. And obviously with Billy Price, he was a first round pick, and the fact that his legacy is getting them a quality starter at defensive tackle for now 4 years now, like, it wasn't worth it, obviously, but the fact that they were able to get something positive out of picking Billy Price, I think that puts it definitely in the top 2. And whether you want Reggie Nelson have 1 or BJ Hill have 1, that's up to you. But I would have them both in the top 2.
Okay, that's fair. I don't know that I'd have him. Well, maybe I would have him that high. I don't know, but obviously he's been an effective piece. And the thing that I like the most about BJ Hill is, I mean, we know when he first came over here, he and Ogunjobi were a great tandem, whether they were rotated in and out, sometimes they were out there together, that sort of thing. And what I respect a lot about BJ Hill is when Ogunjobi did not come back, Hill didn't lose much, if any, effectiveness, on this team and on this roster. He became a leader. He became a guy that, the young guys look up to. And, obviously a little bit of a risk when you let Ogunjobi go and you sign Hill to a big contract. But, I respect the hell out of the fact that Hill was a guy that, you could say in 21, oh, he was kind of leaning on some other guys and prime Hendrickson, prime Hubbard. But moving out of that transition without Ogunjobi, he's done well.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Delta O'Neal trade that you can think of, like just getting, obviously first round pick for Carson Palmer. But in terms of just like player for player trade, which is like that's what the Bengals like to do, and they don't try to make other teams better. As frustrating as that is from an outsider's perspective, like those are the trades that you think of. And obviously, the James Brooks one, well before my time, so I don't have a huge opinion on that one. But yeah, in my lifetime, like those player for player trades, typically the Bengals end up on top of. You think they would do more of that?
Yeah, it was Pete Johnson for James Brooks, if memory serves. And Pete Johnson's career was doing this towards the end, and obviously James Brooks was a young guy, ascending player who was awesome for the Bengals in that offense. And you called it. I kind of forgot a little bit. Nelson did make that Pro Bowl that last year with the Bengals in 2015. He actually made another in 2016 when he was with the Raiders in his 9th and 10th season.
Yeah.
Never made one with Jacksonville and all this kind of stuff. Was a 12-year player, had a really good career, and was a really good player for the Bengals. So yeah, that was it. That was another really, really good one. But anyway, I was asked that question. I'm like, I got to ask John this. So I thought I'd keep you on your feet by asking you some random things before we get specifically into the Sunday night game between the Bengals and the New York Giants. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran. You can get this show on a number of different platforms. On the audio side, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the major ones. We are there. You have to go to the Believe, BLEAV, in Cincy podcast channel. Go there and subscribe to that feed. Our old feed is now defunct, so you have to go resubscribe to that feed. Leave us a review if you can. We would appreciate that. That helps boost our show up and boost back the show. Tell your friends too. Hey, you're Bengals fans, fellow Bengals fans. Hey, you got to resubscribe here. If you like the video side of things, you can get this show. We stream on a number of different Twitter platforms or Twitter. Is it even Twitter anymore? X accounts, as well as Facebook, the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, and of course our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that. Underneath John in his side of the screen, there is an Orange and Black Insider show icon. Click that and options will pop up to subscribe, a bell to be notified when we got new stuff going on, and of course the ability to give us a thumbs up. We appreciate that too. So thank you all. I know this is kind of a weird time tonight that we are going live Friday evening at 7:30. But we appreciate you hanging with us live. We appreciate you listening to the show after the fact. Good stuff. All right. So let's just update everybody in case people do not know, John Sheeran. The Bengals are getting healthy, and they are finally getting Sheldon Rankins back. It would seem Mike Gesicki, who was on the injury report for the first practice Wednesday, as was Zach Moss. Both of them sat out. They are all good to go, and a couple of notable absences for the Giants too.
Yeah, dare I say this is the healthiest the Bengals have been all season, because the only player on the injury report who's not going to play on Sunday is not officially a part of the active roster, because earlier this week, DJ Ivey, who suffered a torn ACL back last December, he was finally cleared to practice. He's been on the PUP list since the beginning of training camp, and he practiced all week, but the Bengals are not going to activate him this week, according to Zach Taylor. So he still has 2.5 weeks to practice without counting against the active roster, but he's doubtful. The only players who are questionable are Chase Brown, who showed up with a quad injury on Thursday. He was limited Thursday and Friday, but Taylor said he's good to go. And Mike Hilton is also questionable, despite him practicing throughout the week full with a knee injury. But you have Mike Gesicki, who's dealt with a hamstring. He's good to go. Sheldon Rankins, who's practiced for the first time in 3 weeks. He was a full participant on Friday, and he's good to go. No worries with Amarius Mims. He was a full participant with his calf injury. And Zach Moss, who suffered that what looked to be like a decently scary ankle injury on Sunday against the Ravens.
Yeah.
He missed practice Wednesday, but he was limited Thursday, was full participant. So you have basically an entire defense now at your disposal if you're Luna Rumo for the first time all season. Like, you had the starting defensive line for the first couple weeks, but you didn't have some key backups there in McKinley Jackson and Miles Murphy. The only piece that you're missing on defense that you had was Dax Hill, but if there's a consolation there, Dax Hill and DJ Turner were battling to be that starting cornerback, and DJ Turner didn't necessarily give that battle away. Dax Hill just played better than him, and I think DJ Turner has been pretty solid in the appearances that he's made this season. So you pretty much have a full cast of characters on defense for the first time.
Yeah, and gonna be a lot on DJ Turner to make stuff happen here. You see here Chase Brown, Joe Burrow on there weekly. You mentioned some of the usual there. Joseph Osai with the shoulder. I think he's pretty much good to go. The big one though for this is Malik Neighbors for the Giants. Kayvon Thibodeau as well. Those guys are both out, John. So this makes for a tempting matchup for the Cincinnati Bengals. And if the Bengals are getting all of their, I know they're losing Dax Hill for the year, but if the Bengals are getting all of their kind of guys back and Malik Neighbors is out, Kayvon Thibodeau, one of their best pass rushers, out, excuses are dwindling pretty thin in terms of being able to pull this one out.
No, I mean, Neighbors now is going to be out for 2 weeks, and he's still like he's going to miss 2 games, and he still enters this week as the NFL leader in receptions. He's just everything for that Giants passing game, and it's a very similar Jamar Chase-esque type of impact for a rookie receiver with an offense that needed that type of a boost. And I think Daniel Jones was just coming kind of into his stride with Neighbors before he got hurt. But I think the Giants still, as an offense, I think they've taken some strides compared to where they started, despite obviously Jones's limitations and inadequacies in some ways. But with Kayvon Thibodeau, though, I feel like that, and this can kind of lead into our discussion about the game. This Giants pass rush is severely underrated, and I don't think many people realize that they are, I believe, the league leader in sacks, because not only are they generating quick pressure in like a top 10 rate amongst the league, they're turning those pressures into sacks. And with Thibodeau, he's consistently out along the right edge, so he would have gone up against Orlando Brown Jr. in this game. His backup, Azeez Ojulari, I believe he's like a young player out of Georgia. I believe he's like a second-round pick, so they got a decently talented guy stepping in. But Thibodeau was one of 3 of the 3-headed monsters along that Giants defensive line, with Brian Burns, who they traded for this offseason, coming off the left edge, and arguably the best defensive player in the league in Dexter Lawrence at nose tackle. So not having Thibodeau out there, it definitely makes things a little bit tougher for the Giants in this game. But I think this is still a really tough matchup for the Bengals offensive line.
Yeah, they've got their hands full even without Thibodeau, that's for sure. And, maybe the Bengals get a little bit of a easier ramp up on defense without Neighbors in there. Well, not maybe, definitely. But, we'll see exactly how they perform without him this week, if it makes that big of a difference from what we've seen from that group so far already, which quite honestly hasn't been all that much. Let's talk about that, because I think it's a good transition to matchups and how the Bengals come out victorious in this one. As you mentioned, a guy like Lawrence would be a valuable commodity in the AFC North. The ability to stop the run and rush the passer, very, very valuable guy. Most of the attention has to be on him, and so. With the Bengals' more recent success, mostly with Chase Brown on the ground, I'm curious to kind of see what they are able to do in that regard, because it's going to be on the interior of that offensive line to figure out a way, and probably constantly double team Lawrence to continue their progress in the run game. I
mean, just imagine if DJ Reader had a quicker get off and could win quicker as a pass rusher. That's who Dexter Lawrence is, like a prime DJ Reader who can hold his own, who can 2-gap, who can get off blocks instantaneously, but somehow has the speed of like a Geno Atkins off of the line. It can cross a guard's face with ease. Like I was watching his tape from last week against Seattle, and Seattle's got a pretty decent offensive line, and he was winning so gosh dang quick. And that's scary, because you have guys who can win quick off the edge too. Brian Burns is so good around the edge and bending around the corner. Like I think Amarius Mims is going to have to be definitely on his toes and his timing with his punches to make sure that Burns doesn't get under his pads. But like you said, man, like you need at least 2 bodies on Lawrence, I think, if you're the Bengals in this game. And I don't know how often that you can do that and still be sustainable in terms of pass protection, because again, it's not just Lawrence up there, and obviously not having Thibodeau, who's I think more of a power rusher, and I think Orlando Brown would have been okay against him for most of the game. But Elijah Chapman, who rushes next to Lawrence on passing downs, he can still cross your face and he can get upfield as well. So this is not a cakewalk by any means for the Bengals offensive line. I think it's a great litmus test, because this is the best Bengals offensive line in Joe Burrow's career. It's the best the Bengals offensive line has looked in almost a decade, I would say, in terms of just stability and pass protection. And I think Volson is playing his best football. You still have Ted Karras being, solid, and same with what goes with Alex Kappa. But like there's going to need to be constant attention on Lawrence, because you cannot allow him to just disrupt the pocket from within. And the Giants have done so well of turning those pressures into sacks, interceptions, tackles for loss, whatever you name it. They've been so disruptive. They've been arguably the most disruptive defensive line of the league.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And look, the Bengals, I'm curious about this. I think it was Brian Baldinger, if I'm not mistaken, on Twitter, who basically said, you know, just keep feeding Jamar Chase, just give the ball to Jamar every time, type of thing. I know there's a little bit of hyperbole there, but I mean, just based on what we saw last week, and we're looking at I asked Ed a little bit about the secondary and stuff like that. It's a young secondary, and so I think there's opportunities, even more so maybe this week, for Jamar Chase to have a big game, T. Higgins to have a big game, and so I think as formidable as that defensive front is for the Giants and their pass rush ability, I do think if the Bengals scheme correctly, maybe it is a little more quick hitters, maybe it is some of that stuff that Chase took to the house, the little flat route to the house in between defenders, maybe that kind of stuff is what's going to win the day for the Bengals, but they need to exploit that secondary.
Yeah, I think if you're able to buy time against this defensive line, there are definite opportunities. And that's what happened with the Seahawks last week. Geno Smith stood tall in that pocket. And when he was, given a good platform, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, they were able to find vacancies against this secondary. And I think, like you said, it's very opportunistic, but it's very aggressive, but that can lead to mistakes. And I think that's where these big plays have happened in regards to just their secondary not being able to hold up their end of the bargain. I know Jamar Chase spoke to the media this week, and he was talking about the Giants cornerback Cordell Flott. He actually played with Chase at LSU, and he was a third-round pick, I believe, in 2022. So he's going to go up against him. So those two know how to go up against each other. They practiced against each other, or at least they're familiar with each other. I'm not sure how much of a crossover in terms of their time at LSU was, but T. Higgins versus Deonte Banks on the other side. Deonte Banks, former first-round pick, that really stereotypical prototype press man cover cornerback who I think that type of cornerback has given Higgins some fits, particularly like up in Cleveland, your Denzel Wards or your Greg Newsomes, if you will, like those Martin Emersons, if you will. So I think that's an interesting matchup. And obviously, Banks has a long way to go in terms of consistency, but I think that style of cornerback play can potentially cause T some problems. But again, if you give Burrow enough time against Burns and Lawrence, I think both Chase and Higgins are going to find some vacancies, and it could be a good game for Mike Gesicki too, because I don't think Isaiah Simmons and Bobby Okereke, they're not as good as they used to be in coverage. So there's going to be some opportunities over the middle as well.
Yeah, apparently, according to Ed Valentine of SB Nation's Big Blue View, he feels that Banks had the best game of his young career, but his best game of his career last week against Seattle, and that's saying something. So he may be feeling pretty confident coming into this one. We'll see, but that's an area. And then what do the Bengals continue to do with the tight ends? I don't know how big or how small of an impact they will have in this one. Obviously, Gesicki had a couple of nice catches last week. Eric All was involved early, pretty early in this season. So, obviously I think the focus still has to be Chase, Higgins, et cetera, but how big of a role might these guys play this week? I don't know, but you gotta be able to mix it up. And maybe if there is so much attention to Chase and or Higgins, maybe things open up for guys like that.
No, I think last week, the Bengals didn't have as much success with 12 personnel because the Ravens were much better at stopping the run than they were dropping back into coverage. And I think against this Giants pass rush, obviously, this is, kind of cliche, but the best way to neutralize a pass rush would it be just run right at them and make sure, they're not pinning their ears back. So I feel like you're going to see a good amount of Eric All in this game, doing the same thing that he's done for these first 5 weeks and doing it beautifully, mind you. Like, even if the Bengals run game wasn't that successful against the Ravens, he was still putting up quality tape, getting to the second level. And I feel like, not running at Dexter Lawrence, that probably isn't the best idea, but trying to find those plays on the perimeter and getting Chase Brown out in space again and having him run behind Eric All. It's been a winning strategy. And I think in this game, particularly when you don't want the Giants pass rush to be, fiending in these obvious dropback situations, I think there might be more of a reliance on the run game in order to neutralize what the Giants do best on defense.
Well, we've talked about kind of key matchups in terms of specific players. What about just general keys to a win, John? I mean, I know it's, yeah, well, the defense has to improve and the offensive line has to play pretty well. I mean, I, how what do we need from the defense in this one? I mean, allowing less than X amount of points, creating X amount of turnovers. What I think we all presume that the offense will be pretty close, if not right at where they've been the last few weeks, right, in terms of productivity. Spotlight on the defense. We talked about at the beginning of the show. We talked about the players only meeting. I mean, what kind of output did they need in order for the Bengals to be successful and win this game?
Look, man. Like there's no neighbors out there, and without neighbors, like there's a reason why he went to the Giants in the draft is because they were so desperate for some type of receiving talent. Without him, it's Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slade, and Jalen Hyde. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson playing pretty well this year. I'm not going to give him his props, but it's still a receiver unit that's lacking some type of dynamicism, and that's exactly what Malik Neighbors provided. So this is still a passing offense with, somewhat of an erratic and inaccurate quarterback in Daniel Jones, and receivers that, the Bengals should be able to at least go toe to toe with, not shut out completely. Like I think they will still find ways to generate explosives. Brian Dable's still a really good offensive coordinator. Darius Slade might get a couple of big plays in there. Wan'Dale Robinson again, like pretty solid receiver on the boundary. Jalen Hyde is going to have to play a little bit more as well. He was a really talented guy at Tennessee a couple of years ago, but he hasn't been involved in the offense at all. So I wonder if he might see a little bit more of an increased opportunity. But yeah, like just not giving up explosives in the passing game, trying to keep the offense from being on schedule so constantly, avoiding a lot of these successful plays on first and second down, making them earn it on third down. Because last week, I mean, third down defense was terrible against the Ravens, but they were constantly in opportune situations to always move the chains. So making sure that Daniel Jones and this passing game is not consistently, charging off 7, 8, 9-yard plays on these early downs to make easy third down conversions for them. Like that's the biggest key for this defense, and it will allow their pass rush for the Bengals against an offensive line that's, it's middle of the pack, I would say at best. Like Andrew Thomas is a great left tackle, and Jermaine Illuminor is a quality veteran at right tackle, but there is opportunities for Sheldon Rankins in his first game back to generate some pressure in it, especially on those third and mediums and third and longs where you have longer dropbacks and whatnot. The Bengals pass rush has to get home. And against these receivers where the Bengals should be able to limit separation for the first few seconds, those opportunities should come up.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I could say much more beyond that. That was very well said, but this I would be surprised if there is a major to somewhat major step back from the offensive side of the ball. And so this game is all about defense and special teams for the Bengals, and really just, can you not make the critical error, even if they are limited in the game? Can you not make it at the critical time? And that includes the offense, obviously, because there was one of those last week. Can you weather the storm? Can all that kind of stuff? Can you, if it is a tight game, are you able to make that extra play or two to ice the game? Because that has not been the Bengals' forte this year. When it's kind of come into crunch time, it hasn't come together for them. They've had, for as great as Burrow has been, there's been opportunities for him to ice away games this year, really in almost, if not every loss, and they haven't had it. It's like he plays superb for 56 minutes type of thing, Patriots game notwithstanding. Yeah. But there was an opportunity there still at the end to maybe come out with that one. But you play superb for the vast majority of the game, and then there's just one or two moments where you go, oh, man, didn't step up. Again, if the defense rises up a bit, though, that margin of error widens instead of being so narrow like it is right now.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. Like, I feel like as long as I don't know what I'm saying. I feel like right now, like there's obviously a lot of optimism with the Bengals offense, and the Giants defense, I feel like, deserves some respect heading into this one. And I think the Bengals defense is in a position where they can kind of surprise and be notably better than what they've been in the past couple of weeks. So to me, like the more I talk about this game and kind of break down both teams, it almost feels like it's going to be a little bit more low scoring than people may think. I feel like for as much as the Bengals offense is capable of doing, this is still a Giants defense that can get after the passer and can be very opportunistic. And the Bengals may give the Giants a couple extra possessions, but I do think that without Malik Neighbors out there, it's going to be a lot harder for the Giants offense to have as much of success on offense as the Ravens and the Commanders and those other teams have done so. So I don't know. Like I feel like we might be looking at slightly lower points in terms of both sides here, and maybe kind of regression back to the mean for both the Bengals offense and defense a little bit.
Okay, so let's go there. What are we predicting here, John?
I think Joe Burrow and the Bengals track record against NFC teams is pretty damn strong. On primetime is also pretty damn strong. I know that 2 weeks ago they lost to the Commanders on Monday Night Football at home, but I do think that this is an offense that the Bengals can do a better job of limiting. And while their offense may run into some troubles trying to stop Dexter Lawrence, trying to stop Brian Burns, and may make one more mistake or two than they've usually done, I think we're looking at a close win for the Bengals here. I'm going to say 24-22.
Okay. I'm in agreement with you. I don't think this is a runaway deal. And really, all of them have been kind of tight. Even the Panthers win, which was by 10 points, it kind of got a little tenuous towards the end there, a tiny bit. If McPherson doesn't kick that kick at the end there to really kind of ice it away, we're talking about, oh boy, here they go driving again. So I'm in agreement with you. I'll say, pretty close to what you said. I'll say 26-21. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch Daniel Jones in primetime for me. I've seen the times I have watched him, he's made like these outstanding plays, these outstanding long runs as a quarterback. And then there's these inexplicable turnovers and different things that occur. So without Malik Neighbors out there, I'm curious to see what Daniel Jones will show up, according again to Ed Valentine on SB Nation's Big Blue View. I think the consensus is Jones has played better than I think a lot of people figured he would, and that the Giants in general are better than people figured they would be. But without Neighbors in there, like you said, is it who's kind of the game breaker, if any, in that wide receiver group? I don't think Jalen Hyatt has a reception this year, so going to be interesting to see who kind of rises up there. But I do see a close win from the Bengals here. We got some is it Danya 31-9 Bengals? Okay, I like that. Oh gosh, this would be brutal. 13-10 Crescito. I don't think I want to watch that one. So at any rate, whatever, a win's a win, and let's get the win streak started, right? Let's drop the mic and get out of here, John. I know it's nice. It's a Friday evening. I know you were gracious enough to come on here later in the day. So what do you got for us on our way out the door?
I want to drop the mic like I should have done last time, and I horrendously forgot. But shout out to Mike Petraglia, who covers the Bengals for CLNS. He has done for many years now. Does great work in terms of posting videos from practice and interviews in the locker room. I ran into him at a golf outing last week for pediatric cancer research, and got to talk with him for a couple of minutes before we teed off and everything. Then after the round, because he and his significant other had to leave before the dinner, he gave me his split the pot tickets. Unfortunately, they didn't win, so I couldn't give him a cut of the winnings or anything, but very gracious dude. Awesome to talk to, awesome to run into again. But shout out to Trags. Yeah, we've had him on. We got to have him on again. He's really good about doing appearances and making the rounds. I know he's done Ice's show, and I've been pleased to be joined with him on that once or twice. And I think you did Ice's show, this Strawberry Ice this week, right? Yep.
Okay. Well, hopefully that went well. I don't have too much, just kind of what I said at the opening. We're keeping all of you down in the Southeast. It's been a rough few weeks for that region in a number of different ways. And if we, in our dumb little slice of Bengaldom here as a show, if we can do something to help you out, or if you want to reach out to us directly and say, hey, this happened to me, I've got X, Y, and Z, we'll see what we can do to maybe help you out. But we definitely are thinking about you all. Glad to hear, at least from what we can tell, the majority, if not all of our listeners, friends, colleagues out there are doing okay despite all the circumstances.
Absolutely, man. It's been a weird fall. I'm afraid it's going to get a little weirder, but for now, let's just let's watch some football and hopefully a win.
Yeah, hopefully a win and more. What did you say? What did you say? A win and then must win month.
Must win month. Hashtag must win month.
I like that a lot. We got to get that going viral. All right, take care, everybody.